The president is strongly behind Secretary of Defense Hegseth. That's what they're saying right now. So we're trying to figure out just what is the truth here. And I want to unpack some of this because there are probably multi-layers of things that are going on here. There are unquestionably some people at the Pentagon who do not like Pete Hegseth. We talked about this before he was ever even confirmed, that he would run into some big headwinds, that there was the institution of the Pentagon that was very resistant to any kind of a new thinking. And the last thing they would want to do is to go a new direction with somebody else, and especially somebody that many wouldn't respect. There was a lot of words I've heard from some who in the Pentagon who've said that he was demeaned as, oh, there's that major, because that was his rank when he was in the service. I think he was a National Guardsman. Even though he had 2 Bronze Star medals for valor, which is two very high combat awards, he still never rose above the rank of major before he got out. Not that he was prevented from doing so. That's just as far as he went in his military service. And they don't want to look down on somebody who was a mere major, telling 4-star generals what to do, et cetera. So I always knew that was going to be an issue. One of the other things I said, both on our show and on numerous network television shows that I went on to talk about this when it came out, I said, no, he does not have all the requisite the resume that you normally see for Secretary of Defense. He hadn't run a big corporation. He hadn't been a 2-star general, 4-star general, any of those kinds of things. And so according to what the normal qualifications are for a lot of the previous Secretaries of Defense, he didn't have those qualifications. But I said, but maybe that's the last thing we need, because I did point out that many of the guys like Lloyd Austin, like a couple of the guys from the first Trump administration, were brilliant on paper and terrible in their performance. They did awful. And so I said, maybe it's time that we get somebody from outside. And what President Trump had said he was going to hire Hegseth for was to be an agent of change, to going to bring the warrior ethos back into the Pentagon, that was going to reform the thing to make it a more war-fighting strong organization. I said, if he does what he says, if Hegseth brings those things into accountability and turns them into reality and not just bumper sticker phrases, I said, he may be a breath of fresh air. He may be exactly what we needed. Well, that was as long as he actually did those things. And he had, listen, we got to be honest, he had a big uphill climb, because he was going to have to prove himself that he was able to handle that job. And I also suggested, because he didn't have some of those qualifications of running big organizations, et cetera, he was going to have to surround himself with people who have done those kind of things, who can handle those kinds of things or advise him in those directions, et cetera. But he himself was still going to have to be the leader. He was going to have to set the standard. He was going to have to be the pacemaker that everybody else would follow. And he's going to have a strategic vision, because you can have somebody to help you to do some of these things and understand how large organizations work. But if you don't yourself have the vision and understand where these things need to go, then those people are going to be of only limited assistance to you. You've got to be the one that's providing the direction that everybody else is going to pull in behind. Kicking and screaming if necessary. I even suggested that he may have to fire several of the general officers. He may have to bring people in that are wanting to follow a new path and didn't want to just put the brakes on everything and wasn't going to be dead weight to try and prevent anybody from modernizing the Department of Defense, et cetera. And now then we see that apparently is part of it, or at least it appears that is part of it. But that's not all of it. I think we, again, trying to be honest, we are unintimidated and uncompromised on this channel. We tell you the truth, whatever it is, whether anybody likes it or not. And that means we have to look at all sides of this. And there are unequivocally some things that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has done which were wrong and just problematic. And not the least of which this whole issue with Signalgate. That by itself is a major, major breach. I can tell you with complete certainty that if anybody in the Department of Defense, anybody in the U.S. Army where I served, or any other branch of the military conducted or even talked about ongoing combat operations over Signal, any network that was anything besides a certified secure communications meaning like they call it the SIPRNet or the JWICS, which is top secret, or the SIPRNet, which is a secret network, etc. You cannot talk about any mission operations over anything besides those. Everybody knows that. Nobody who's ever served in uniform has any confusion on this point. And to say, well, there was no classified information on there is obviously nonsense. You're talking about what kind of strike aircraft are going in. You're talking about taking out a target. You're talking about where he's going. He's moving into his girlfriend's house. All of those things are very, very revealing. Now, obviously, he thought he was on signal, and he thought it's encrypted end to end, so nobody's going to get into it. Well, unless someone accidentally is brought into it, which is exactly, of course, what happened with the Atlantic Journal reporter. And we all know what happened with that. That's where the thing blew up there. But that's one of the reasons why you don't do that, even if it is encrypted end to end, because it can have somebody who's not authorized to see this brought into it. That can't happen in a JWIC situation. That can't happen with secure classified communications, because unless you're vetted and you've gone through all of the background investigations and been certified as having a security clearance, you can't get into those. So there can't be a mistake. That's one of the big reasons why you have that, not the least of which because that's something that only the U.S. government is controlled, as opposed to Signal, which is a civilian app. And it is subject to being interrogated or broken into. Apparently it's really good, but it's a possibility. But if we don't have control over it, you can't talk about classified information there. He did. He talked about it a lot on there, but then just declared that he didn't. And of course, nothing happened to anybody. Nothing happened to the National Security Advisor, who set up the whole thing. Nothing happened to the Secretary of Defense, who's the one who was given all these updates, et cetera. That's something that's going to have to be discussed. But that does not help his case inside the building, even among people who do want to help him out, even among people who do want to say, yes, let's have some changes. If they see making such a rookie mistake, something that they know that anyone else in the building makes that mistake, they are fired and they might be brought up on charges. It's that serious of an issue that you made that egregious of a violation. And when the guy at the very top is doing that and then tells everybody nothing's wrong with it when everybody else knows it is, that just undercuts his reputation. It undercuts how much they're going to trust him when they hear him violating a law that they would persecute anyone else and then denying it even happened and just moving on like nothing happened. So we're talking about, we're going to hold people accountable, and we're going to come in, and now the Department of Defense we're not just going to let people slide. And then the top guy is the one who violates it and it commutes his own sentence and says, yeah, no, it's fine, no problem here. Now, how is he going to hold anybody else accountable? Anybody else who has security violations like that? You see where this is a real problem. So by itself, this is. Now then we add another layer of problems, though, where it comes in with Dan Caldwell and these other two officials that were first escorted out of the building with no explanation. It was reported that there was some kind of leak that they were being investigated for, although they themselves were told nothing. And then all of a sudden on Friday, they're outright fired. And according to his statement, which I'll read in just a minute, they had still, at least as of the day that was published, which I think was yesterday or Saturday, don't know what the situation was, don't know what happened and what they were even being accused of, meaning they never even had a chance to give their side of a story. They never had a chance to examine what was accused, anything like that. They don't even know. We don't even know. All we know is what's being, ironically, leaked by various people who claim that they were investigated for X, Y, and Z. And if the person themselves doesn't even know about it, and they were allegedly being investigated for leaks, someone else leaked about the leakers, the alleged leakers. So we still don't know. But you see that this is just chaos. It is just disaster in the Department of Defense. You just can't have that at the top. And yet, I showed you Caroline Leavitt's X post here just a very short period of time ago. Earlier today, before that part had come out, and this claim that the White House was looking to replace Hegseth, she was asked on one of the Fox shows this morning about what does the president think about this.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Yeah, a phenomenal job. I mean, I don't know that you can make that argument that he's been doing a phenomenal job. He has made some major missteps. You just can't sugarcoat those. You can say, if you're being honest, he's doing a really good job in some areas. He's executing the things that the president told him to do. Some of these other areas we're working on. But unfortunately, we live in a world now where it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat. You can't ever tell the truth on anything. You have to sugarcoat everything. We saw it, of course, made me nauseous some of the times in the Biden administration, how they would just cover over things that had happened and just say that black was white and white was black, and try to convince you that what you can see straight in front of your eyes isn't the same way. And many of the Republicans condemned the Biden administration for it. And now you see that many of them do the same thing. So that undercuts the ability to trust in anybody, because they'll only say self-serving things. And when someone is red-handed, caught doing something that's clearly wrong, they just blanket, nope, nothing happened here. Everything's great. It's phenomenal, in fact. And it's just ridiculous to even say that. And she also says in there, the entire Pentagon is against him. That's what she said. No, the entire Pentagon is not against him. These three guys who were fired were not against him. They were for Pete Hegseth. They were loyal to Pete Hegseth. And I know for sure that Dan Caldwell, who like I said, I've known for quite a number of years, he had a long history with Hegseth before. That's why he was hired to be a senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense. And so this is somebody that had loyalty to him. And now then it looks like, and again, I'm only speculating here because I don't have any firsthand knowledge. And I'll just categorically say I have not talked to Dan since any of this stuff broke. All I can see is what he wrote on his public X post, which I'll get to in a minute. But I've actually reached out to him. I posted an X post of my own that was in support of him. I said everything I've ever known about him is he's been a man of character, of honor and courage. He's a combat veteran himself. And so I've never seen any evidence that he would even contemplate doing this. I can tell you that just from my personal dealings, he's also associated with the defense priorities, is that in our engagements there, he has shown to be extremely confidential in information, even things that I thought one time, I won't get into the details, but I thought, well, you can share that with me because it's really kind of low level. But he was so intent on keeping anything confidential that he was not supposed to share from anybody else, he would. And if somebody who will be that overt to say, no, I'm not going to violate any confidentialities and anything in something that doesn't even matter, is certainly going to do it when it does matter. And when you're talking about national security and literally potentially breaking the law. So I can't say for a fact because I don't know the evidence. I don't know whatever's been presented against him. But I can just say I have severe doubts. I would be shocked if there was actually anything that he had actually done he wasn't supposed to. And when I take these people that I know were hired because they were loyal to President Trump, they were loyal to his vision, they were loyal to the Secretary of Defense, that suddenly they were just going to turn on a dime like that and all turn against him, it just seems really implausible. But so far, no one's provided any evidence. No one's provided any even accusations other than leaks. And yet these guys are gone. And it just speaks of somebody that, okay, if these guys were loyal to you, loyalty has to work both ways, folks, just straight up. It has to work both ways, not just from the lower to the higher. It has to work from the higher to the lower, or you or you weaken the bonds of the loyalty even from the lower. Because if people think nobody's got my back here, then I can promise you, just human nature being what it is, they're going to be a much less likely to want to go out on a limb for anybody in the future. That's not a good thing. You want an organization that is loyal to the boss because the boss has earned it. That's what you want to have, and that's when you have a good situation here, because then you have a solid organization when the people believe in the top, and the top believes in and trusts and takes gets the back of the subordinates. And if there's an issue there and they didn't do anything wrong, then they need to step up and say so. But we never heard the Secretary of Defense say a word about any of these three guys, except now then, I showed you what Caroline Leavitt said earlier today. Yesterday, when Hegseth himself was asked about this situation, he kind of turned on him.
See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. This group, no, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know it, we know exactly what it is.
Yeah, see, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. When you're taking somebody who has been loyal to you and then you throw them under the bus and call them disgruntled employees with an axe to grind. They don't have an axe to grind. They aren't disgruntled other than frustration that they got cut loose and nobody had their back. But even then, and in fact, Gary, if you can throw that full screen up there of the X post that Caldwell signed. Caldwell, along with the other two guys, they published a joint X post where they all said the same thing. This is how they were feeling. He said, "We are incredibly disappointed by the manner in which our service at the Department of Defense ended. Unnamed Pentagon officials have slandered our character and baseless attacks on our way out the door. All three of us served our countries honorably in uniform. For two of us, this included deployments in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And based on our collective service, we understand the importance of information security and worked every day to protect it. At this time, we still have not been told what exactly we're investigated for, if there was still an investigation going on, if there ever even was a real investigation of, quote, leaks to begin with." Then he says, "While this experience has been unconscionable, we remain supportive of the Trump-Vance administration mission to make the Pentagon great again, to achieve peace through strength. We hope in the future and to support these efforts in different capacities." So even so, they've been thrown under the bus. They're not throwing anything back. You call disgruntled employees with an axe to grind, and this is how they respond. They say, "We still believe in the administration. We still believe in the mission. We just don't like the way we were treated by these unnamed people." And I don't know who they were. I mean, all I have is this one comment here by Pete Hegseth that I just played for you, which came after this was published. But, you know, who all the people were that started this, lots of rumors floating around. So I'm not even going to get into the speculation because I don't know anything about what's true. The only thing we can say is that this is just a really ugly situation here. And it's not a good look for the president. And I don't know whether which one is the lie. Was the lie that someone in the White House said that they're looking to actively replace the Secretary of Defense, or was the lie that Caroline Leavitt said that no, there's no truth to that at all? Obviously, they can't both be true. It's one or the other. Either he is being actively considered for being let go, or he's not. So somebody's not telling the truth. And obviously in Washington, D.C., that's an understatement to say the least. But if you want to build the Pentagon, if you want to reform the Pentagon, you've got to have somebody with the highest of morals, ethics, and capacity to get this done. And then people that you can trust to do it. And people that can have people at the various levels of their organization that they trust and they have, that are loyal to the mission and the vision, and also have the capacity. I know at least Caldwell did. I don't know the other two fellows, so I can't really talk about them. But I know that Dan certainly had all those qualities here. And if the president isn't looking to replace the Secretary of Defense, he may need to start. Because if he doesn't replace him, then there is a shadow hanging over the Secretary of Defense right now and the Department of Defense. Because listen, whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't even matter. I'm telling you for a fact, I've worked in the Pentagon. I worked in the Pentagon for nearly 3 years myself. And I was on active duty for nearly 21 total years of active service, 4 combat deployments. And I promise you, if you lose confidence in the leadership, if you believe that they aren't loyal to you, that they have a separate standard, that they are not held accountable when they make mistakes, then you just undermine anybody's ability to trust them in the future and to put themselves on the line and to really embody the vision that they have, because you don't trust them. So either Hegseth is going to have to find some way to rebuild that trust, to address what happened and tell people something that's plausible, that makes sense, or they're going to have to find somebody else, because otherwise, whatever President Trump wants to get done in the Department of Defense, whatever reform he wants to get, however much he wants the warfighter ethos to come in, all those things, which I admire and suggest and applaud, if you're going to get that done, it's going to be really hard to get it done with Pete Hegseth now. You're going to probably have to find somebody else, and that's not going to be an easy fix either, because a lot of the same problems that went into selecting Hegseth would you still have to manage some of those. But I can tell you it's something that desperately does need to get done. I've been a big advocate of reform for the Department of Defense for quite a long time, and will continue to be so. And I want the DOD to succeed. I want the Pentagon to be a good place, and something that can have a unity of effort and that is loyal up and down the chain. That's something I want to see, and I hope the president can get that done. Whatever he has to do to make it happen, I support that. So we'll have to wait and see how it's going to work out.